Cool. Let's do it.
All right. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Comic Book Herald Live. Hey, everybody, I'm Dave Busing, founder and editor in chief of comicbookherald.com. For today's live stream, which I hope many of you can join us for, I'm going to be joined by a very special guest, Zack Davisson. We're going to be talking about Ultimate X-Men. Zack is an award-winning translator, writer, lecturer, and scholar of manga and Japanese folklore and ghosts. Let's bring him in here and on the chat. Zack, thanks for joining today.
Hey,
How you
thanks
doing?
for having me. Good to be here.
Absolutely. I've been doing a rundown of all the Ultimate Universe stuff kind of
hmm
as kind of the first volumes, first trade collections
Oh, nice.
more or less become available. And for Ultimate X-Men, I was like, it'd be cool if we could get you on to talk about it because I feel like, it's Ultimate X-Men, right? And you have Peach Momoko, who's this kind of superstar in the
hmm
comics business for good reason, right? Just this incredible vision and approach to art. But you've been working with Peach super closely across Ultimate X-Men, across Demon Days,
Yeah,
across a Demon Wars as well. And I feel like folks aren't as aware of
hmm
what you're doing. And I wanted to have you on so we could talk about it.
yeah. No, that's awesome. Yeah, I've known Peach since I think we met in 2000. Gosh, what is it now? 15, maybe earlier. I don't know. As I often say, I've known Peach Momoko since before she was Peach Momoko. So
Mhm.
But yeah, I've been working with her. I mean, we've been friends for a long time, and then when she sort of exploded onto the comic scene and started doing her own comics, I she brought me along for the ride, and it's been awesome. It's been a great partnership. So I enjoy
Yeah.
collaborating with her quite a bit.
Awesome. Awesome. And so folks know in the title. So I think on the issues you're listed as the
Yeah,
script
my
adapter, but
credit
like,
my credit is always crazy, and the one thing I can promise people that is not is a translation. Is absolutely like
yeah,
I
yeah.
do know I did do so. The easiest way to think of it is old school Marvel method. Like if you think about the way that so Peach will basically she'll have her rough drafts and her script and her like plots, and then she'll have like sort of like little bits of what she wants characters, like what the story is and everything, and then I just basically go through and dialogue the whole thing.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So it's the very that classic sort of yeah, Marvel method approach of,
Yeah, Marvel method
Kirby
approach. Yeah.
Kirby gives Lee the thing and he
hmm
dialogues.
Yeah,
Okay, so I think that
that's
was a
almost
question a lot of people had was like,
mhm.
is it translation? Is Peach communicating script in English? That sort of stuff.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, she'll have stuff that she wants, and then we'll do a lot of back and forth stuff, because a lot of like, when we first started out together, like, Peach really just wanted every comic to be silent, like, that's what she wanted. She wanted the
Yeah.
art to carry the whole story, she wanted no characters to be talking, and I was just like, "Peach, you just can't do that, especially not in Marvel comics," and so one of the things that I always brought to, especially Demon Days, was also to make sort of, like, Marvelize the comics,
Mhm.
our old, editor, Lindsay Cohick, she used to say that, Peach makes comics, but Zach makes the Marvel comics.
Mm.
Because I have a Marvel background in the way that Peach doesn't. Like Peach really is not particularly familiar with the Marvel universe. She certainly didn't grow up reading it. She doesn't know any of these characters as well. Like I remember one time I put in a special effects and Peach was like writing back to me. She's like, "What is this? Like, why did you have this in here? This makes no sense." And I'm like, "Peach, trust me. Everyone knows that Nightcrawler goes Bamf." But she had no
Yeah,
idea that Nightcrawler goes Bamf. I
sure.
mean, so those are the kind of things. And also just like I try to bring like a lot of like personality and story and something to the characters. It just like, I think helps support Peach and because I know what she wants to achieve and just, bringing sort of my own skill there in dialogue and helping moving the story along to where she wants it to be.
Yeah, so that's interesting because one of the things that I think has been celebrated, but
hmm
also been controversial among fans who it's not vibing with is like how Peach, seems to not she doesn't have the comics nerd background
Nope.
that so many of us have growing up with this stuff,
Nope.
right? And you see in interviews and stuff, and she's like, she doesn't have like, there's not like this faithfulness to Claremontian vision of X-Men. Like, there's none of that. Like,
Nope.
it's all new, right? And it's
Yep.
kind of taking the concepts and ideas and being able. What's your own background with that stuff, and how
Oh,
kind of closely are you?
I'm super Marvel. Like, I'm
Yeah,
like I grew up reading, reading X-Men, like the fact that I currently work on X-Men now is still just like a shock to me. Like
yeah,
every time that I sit down to write an issue, I'm like, hey, well done, Zach. I mean, I was just like an
yeah.
X-Men fanatic. I've got an X-Men #1 signed by Stan Lee. I've got a full run of I think I've got X-Men 1 through 350. I've got a full run of.
Heck,
Um I've and that was always Marvel was always my jams as a kid. So
yeah.
yeah, 100%. I mean, I've lost touch with it a lot over the years. I think I think it's really hard to like just constantly keep up with everything. But I
Hmm.
certainly have the I have Marvel comics deep in my DNA for sure. And I know that working with Peach, I mean that's one of her things too. Is like she doesn't know anything about Marvel. I
Hmm.
mean, she's certainly not going to. And it was actually kind of funny reading some of the feedback from people. When Ultimate X-Men came out because they were like, "Oh, maybe it's starting this way, but any minute now, I'm sure, any minute now,
Yeah.
suddenly Wolverine will appear." And I'm like,
Right.
No, they won't. Like, this is it. This is what you're getting. You're like, because Peach doesn't really make. I mean, Peach only makes Peach Momoko comics. I mean, the
Mhm.
fact that it happens to be X-Men is almost irrelevant to the fact that it's Peach Momoko doing Peach, being Peach Momoko, but
Mm.
she's just playing around in the X-Men universe currently. It was actually, I mean, it was really funny when we first were, because she often gets surprised a lot by fans' reactions because
Yeah.
she didn't think that people particularly cared about the X-Men characters. She thought that X-Men was all about the themes of like that, like it's like she's like, well, people care about Captain America and people care about the Avengers as characters, but she's
Yeah.
like, people don't really care about the X-Men as characters. It's all more about the themes. And I was like, Peach, people really care about the X-Men as characters. um and so she was really shocked when there was a bit of a backlash against it because she didn't, once again, she didn't think the characters of the X-Men were important. She thought the themes of the X-Men were all that were important.
Yeah, yeah. Well, this comic does
Yeah,
it puts that to the test in some really interesting ways, right? When
totally.
your lead in is Hisako, it's Armor, who is
We're
not an unknown
yeah,
to X-Men fans, but certainly a deeper cut, right? For
and
many of
like
us.
from Peach's point of view, she doesn't see it as a deeper cut. She's just like, here's a
Yeah,
list of characters. Here's the characters that interest me.
yeah,
And I thought it was kind of funny because when I was talking to a bunch of my friends about when we were working on it before even the issue came out, I was like, I honestly don't know how fans are going to react because we're making an X-Men comic without the X-Men in it.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and I think that part of that's that it's called Ultimate X-Men. It could just as easily have been called Ultimate New Mutants, and people wouldn't have cared as much, or something like
Right,
that.
right.
Um, I will say
Which
that
I
I,
get why you call it X-Men, right? I
yeah,
mean, it's part of 4. There's only 4 books in the line in this new
yeah,
universe. It's gonna get attention, it's gonna get eyeballs.
I,
It
I
does
was.
feel Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say I was the one who insisted that they finally call themselves the X-Men, and I forget what issue it was,
I was
but
just
yeah,
gonna ask. Okay,
yeah,
yeah.
that was me. Yeah,
Okay, so
I'm like, Peach, we gotta eventually say X-Men in here.
so when it comes to, like, actually getting the code name in there, which I like the way I like the way that you integrated that, where it was
Yeah,
like,
yeah, I was
because you
pretty
gotta
happy
think of
with
a way
that.
to do it, and you got the
Mhm,
grades, and it was perfect. And what about, like, okay, so a little spoilery, I suppose, for those who
mhm.
haven't read, but even if you've read only the first issue, there's a shadowy presence. X-Men
Yes.
fans have a connection. Are you pushing for, "Hey, we should connect that to the name people know," or kinda is that how
Not
does that
really.
go?
I mean, like, if I push for anything, I push a little bit for her to go further away from it. I feel
Yeah,
like I feel like we've established right now that the readers will respond to what we're doing, and I feel like there's less need for us to connect anything X-Men-ish,
yeah,
like one of the things that Peach likes to do is sort of like, connect this character, make it, oh, maybe this will be my version of Cyclops or my version of, such and such. We did that all with Demon Days, and I was like,
right.
Peach, we don't have to be beholden to that. We could just create something absolutely brand new. It doesn't have to be constantly a reference to something, but because she's going through a lot of old reference material, and she'll find something that resonates with her, and so she'll sort of like put that into the story.
Mhm, mhm.
But
Very
yeah, I
cool.
mean, I think the shadow guy, like if you're an X-Men person, like you instantly know who a lot of these people are, and that's fun too. Like I like that it works on multiple levels. I also like the fact that you can have never read an X-Men comic in your life and pick it up and be 100% fine with it. Uh,
Yeah, totally.
but and even then, like a lot of our characters are characters in name only. Like Nico Monoro, I don't think she's anything like the Runaways character. I mean, she's basically entirely our own personality wise,
Right,
invention.
right. Yeah, well, and just even just abilities and
Hmm.
connection to mutants and all that. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's a name that has some recognition, but certainly I think there's one scene with the staff where you're kinda like,
Yeah,
"Oh,
there's
maybe."
one scene where the staff of one comes out,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
No, so you get that. Very cool. I mean, I think it's part of the thrill of Ultimate X-Men is for folks who are deeply ingrained in the long history of X-Men like
Mhm,
myself, it is actually very refreshing to read something that is so apart from it
mhm,
while, that is because one of the opportunities with an Ultimate Universe like this is it's like you can make this thing almost entirely your own as far as
mhm.
editorial and any direction may allow you to. And it seems like in your case, there's a tremendous amount of freedom.
100% freedom. Yeah, like
Yeah,
yeah, 100%. Like just over at San Diego Comic Con, I was talking to our editor Will Moss about that, and he's just like, he's like, you know what, you guys have basically all the freedom you want to the extent that the readers are responding to it, and like
sure.
so he's like, I'm not gonna when I see the response that I'm getting, I'm not gonna question it. I'm not gonna like try to rein you in when it's clearly successful, it's clearly working. And I think
Yeah.
that's great. I've heard from quite a few people who've, you know, this is their first Marvel comic they've ever read, which I think
Mhm.
is amazing. I just heard from someone who said their 13-year-old son just set up their very first pull box at a comic shop in their life just to get Ultimate X-Men. And
Nice, very nice.
yeah, I think that by doing something so entirely unique and by just basically like, you know, creating something entirely new, I think that we've found a little bit of energy and passion there, maybe for the X-Men. That didn't exist if you're just sort of like doing retread upon retread upon retread.
Totally. Yeah. Well, and we've seen, like, if I want a Wolverine story, I
Hmm.
have so many decades of good
So
Wolverine
many, so
stories.
many decades of good work. I mean,
Yeah,
and it's not like there's awesome stuff like my friend, Jackson and Colin. They're doing NYX and they're doing like in continuity stuff, and like it can be really
totally.
awesome.
Yeah.
Um, but I think hopefully what we've shown is that there's room for different for this too. It's not
Yeah.
this instead of. I want it to be this too.
Right. Right. Which is part of the
Mhm.
appeal. Do you get any, so you have like tremendous editorial freedom so long as readers are responding, which it sounds like very much they
Mhm.
are. Do you get any direction in terms of like there's kind of this big picture. We have the maker built this new universe. Do we have to build to certain things plot
No, no,
wise? No.
I don't even know that Peach knows that the maker is a real thing. I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, like, like maybe in theory. I mean, she's been part of like some of the meetings and everything. But I mean, like, there's no pressure whatsoever to connect it to the larger Ultimate Universe. There's absolutely not
Yeah.
whatsoever. I think people are pretty happy with us just doing our own thing in our own little place.
Yeah. That's kind of amazing. That's like
It is. It's
for the
truly
book to be
amazing.
called
Yeah.
Ultimate X-Men and to
Yeah.
just be totally on its own like that.
Yeah, it's truly bizarre. I don't know why they let us do it. I don't, but then I don't know why they let us do Demon Days either.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there were just so many things where like every single day, and that this happens to me. I'm just like, why? Why is this happening? I don't want to question it too much. It's too cool and it's too great, and I'm enjoying it far too much. I
Yeah.
mean, I get to work with my friend on a comic that's meant so much to me all my life, and I'm not gonna ask why too much. I'm just gonna enjoy it, and glad that others are enjoying it and responding to it too.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah.
I'm curious, how has the progression for so Demon Days for readers who aren't
Mhm.
aware, and definitely if you have like Marvel Unlimited or can find it at your shop, you should check this one out. Because it's the two of you doing this really amazing like alternate reality kind of a Marvel universe. It's very and you're the expert
Mhm.
here to correct me. Is it yokai
Yep.
on the Japanese folklore
Mhm.
influence, and it's like we'll get a version of a Thor or Storm or Hulk or whatever, but it's like totally warped through this these mythologies that certainly
Mhm.
for myself we're less familiar, and you do this really cool like explanation history of what these are
Mhm.
in the back of these issues. What kind of lessons do you think the two of you learned doing Demon Days in terms of like how you work together now?
That's a great question. So like my when we were doing Demon Days, like that was my elevator pitch for Demon Days was always what if Studio Ghibli did the Marvel universe? So
Yeah.
that's kind of like how I think about it. It was really tied into to Japanese mythology, and it was also even more like it was at first we were more sort of like beholden to earlier stories because that was part of the pitch of it, that Peach was going to be doing, you know, like like Thor, we have, but then we pretty much I think got away from that rapidly, like the whole idea of the story that she would do these sort of like famous Marvel comic series like Civil War and do her own version of them. I mean, there was something of that,
Mm,
but realistically, not so much. I mean, I think that she took control of the wheel pretty quickly. And the two of us, we definitely were like, there's some trial and error on how we're going to work together. Um, Especially like one of my favorite pages is when Spider Gwen is like first appears and she recites this poem by the Japanese poet Basho. I put all of that in there, and I was like Peach just wanted that to be like a silent panel. And once again, I'm just like, that was just sort of our process where it's like Peach, you can't have just this silent comic. You have to have dialogue, and what's more, the characters have to have personality.
Hmm.
And hopefully that personality should try to reflect at least a little bit what the Marvel characters are. Which doesn't, which sometimes she's pretty adamant against it. Like the one that always cracks me up, and I was trying to talk her against this, but she ended up doing a silent Spider-Man, and I was like, Pete, Spider-Man's whole thing is that he quips, um,
Yeah.
and I wrote a bunch of dialogue him doing like Spider-Man quips, and she's like,
Yeah.
no, my Spider-Man doesn't talk, and I'm like, all right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it truly is. I think what's so kind of shocking about it is there aren't many creators in recent Marvel history who
Mhm.
kind of just get to like so fully do their own thing and have
Yeah.
their own vision for these characters, you
Yeah.
know? So yeah, if you want a literal
Mhm.
Spider-Man who has
Yeah.
no quips and never talks, like you can do that in Demon Days.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And
are there plans to continue Demon Days and Demon Wars, or are you just all in on Ultimate X-Men
No, we're
and
all in on
we'll
Ultimate
see?
X-Men, especially Peach. Like one of the other things with Demon Wars and Demon Days is that she had her own schedule also. And so this is the first time that she's confronting what it means to do a monthly comic.
Yeah.
Which has been, she's had to pull back on conventions. She's had to really stop and put a lot of her life in focus because doing a monthly comic is just such a greater demand than doing, like Demon Days. I think we did like 6 issues a year or something like that. I forget exactly what it was, but it was not, we would basically do one when Peach finished one.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's definitely been a big change. But yeah, I think we're pretty, like we've got some pretty long term plans for Ultimate X Men. So as long as people keep buying Ultimate X Men, we've got like a couple years mapped out.
Really?
If it stays popular, yeah,
Very nice. Okay.
yeah,
So you're
yeah,
you're in it for the long haul, which is
yeah.
exciting, I think, for fans here. So when you say you've got a couple years mapped out, like how do you kind of process out like is it big beats, and things you want to hit? Like how do the two of you work
Yeah,
on what the future
basically,
looks like?
kind of just like a vague roadmap. I mean, the thing with Peach's stuff is she never plans. She's not much of a planner, you know. One of my favorite ways that my friend Jim Zub describes it, is that there's two types of writers. There's planners and then pantsers, as he calls it, people who fly by the seat of their pants.
Mm,
And Peach is 100% a pantser. I mean, she just sits down and she starts, like we've got like this super vague roadmap and like not intense at all. I mean, maybe like a few sentences of stuff that we think would be cool to incorporate later on.
yeah.
But then ultimately, like that could change entirely if mid drawing Peach decides she wants something else to happen. I mean,
Okay.
we've had a couple of times that happen where Peach will just want to change the story entirely like mid page, and I was like, and I'll have to kind of reel her in at least a little bit and say like, Peach, look, back here on this page we've already established such and such happened, so we kind of have, I play continuity cop a little bit as well on the
Yeah, yeah.
series, just making sure she understands, because I think I understand what readers, especially X-Men readers, want more than Peach does. Because she's never had to sort of like deal with, I mean, not deal with, but I mean, she's never had to sort of like understand what it means to have a readership of fans that are already fans of a property. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like when she was doing Demon Days and we were doing Demon Days together, it was much different because people enjoyed the differences more. But I
Yeah.
think that once you're in continuity, I mean, even in ultimate continuity, there's a little bit more expectations on the reader's points.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I
Mhm.
think that's for those who have pushed back or just found it not to their liking, I think many of them were looking for the classic X-Men, right? And it's
Totally.
it's not going to be that. And I think what's nice about Ultimate X-Men is it's very clear
Hmm.
from jump. This is going to be your and Peach's vision for what
Hmm.
X-Men in X-Men story can be. It's not, so it's like you're not faking them out. There's no
No,
head fake here, right?
no, that's the thing that people, because I know that, like, I know some people don't like it, and that's 100% fine. Nothing is ever going to
Oh
resonate
yeah.
with everyone. That is simply impossible. But I think the one thing I don't want people to do is I don't want people to think that it's suddenly going to come something else, because
Mm.
that's the one thing I can guarantee you is that it will not. It will never be there. You're never going to flip a page and suddenly find the X-Men you love standing there.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
Okay.
not a thing that's going to happen. What it is what it's gonna is what it's gonna be. We have, this is the story. The other thing that I feel I really like about the story a lot right now, and I really like the direction it's going, is that it's very patiently paced.
Yes.
So I know a lot of other people are like, "Well, it takes me so long," and I'm like, "Yeah, that's honestly that's on purpose. It is on purpose, not trying to wow you with each page. I mean, we have we have the story, but it's gonna be slow. It's not going to suddenly turn on the gas and start speeding along. I mean, this is the pace, this is the story, this is what you're gonna get, and hopefully you like it.
What is the thinking there as far as the pacing and the patience, taking your time? Like, what is the essential nature of that from your point of view?
I think mostly it just comes from the fact that Peach comes from a Japanese comic background. And manga, I mean, like a lot of people talk about the art being manga influenced. I'm like, the art's kind of irrelevant. But what it is that it's actually paced like a manga,
Mhm.
because manga are just paced very patiently. Part of the reason is because you have a dedicated readership. You have time to build your story. And American comics, there's this like almost desperation sense that you're losing readers with every page,
Yeah.
and if you're not constantly giving them adrenaline, they're not going to pick up the next issue. And Japanese comics with a much more robust market, where they don't have that fear, they just have a lot more time to lay out a slower story, and readers will be there for that slower story. And so I think that just when Peach paces, she paces like a Japanese person paces, which is going to be slow and it's going to be more deliberate. And then it's punctuated with what Peach calls her shonen moments, because if you
Mm.
know shonen magazines like Naruto and stuff like that. So every now and then she'll like, oh, I got to give the fans a shonen moment where we have a fight scene, and she'll throw
Yeah.
those in there.
Yeah. Very nice. Okay.
Yeah,
No,
but
that
it's
I like that
yeah.
explanation because it's definitely I think I've been trying to articulate, like, the value of the pacing. Like, I like
Hmm.
that we're taking our time. I like that we get to settle in, but at the same time, when you're reading on the monthly cadence of
Hmm.
1 issue a month, it is you can definitely have that feeling of, like, "Okay, that was 5 minutes," and it's that thing where it's like, "Yeah, this took the creators
Hmm.
months to do,"
Yep.
right? And it's 'cause I think Raina Telgemeier has a quote about this where it's like, "That book is 3 years of my life
Hmm.
and 30 minutes of your
30
time,"
minutes of
whatever,
yours.
right?
Yeah.
It's something I'm
Yep.
totally paraphrasing. But it's I think
Yeah.
that pacing and valuing it 'cause I reread it before this, and
Hmm.
I think this of 99% of comics, it reads a lot better together.
Hmm.
Um,
Oh, sure.
and I think that's a challenge too that, like, some readers, you get caught in that rat race of
Hmm.
monthly, 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 and it's like, it's when it's slow, it's like, "Oh, but I just wanna know. I just wanna get to the next thing," you know?
Totally.
Yeah.
And like I mean, it's worse in I don't know if it's worse or better, but like when you're reading a manga in format, it's a weekly thing. But then like you'll get up to one where you've actually caught up, and then it's because the chapters are only like 10 pages,
Yeah.
and then you've got to wait like 2 weeks for the next chapter, and it can
Yeah.
be agonizing. Like I will purposefully, when I'm reading manga, I'll purposely not read them and stack them up for like a little bit so I can catch up to them.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
So
but
you're not
yeah,
trying to get that fix in,
yeah.
10-page increments.
10
Yeah,
pages, and you're
totally.
like, "Oh, I want the next one, I want the next one."
Yeah.
I mean, I think it'll read better. I don't know if I think it'll read better together. I mean, they're certainly plotted to be read individually,
Mhm.
but they're just think of them as more patient. I mean, that's the one thing I would say of the series, is that the pacing is designed to be patient. Take
Yeah.
your time with them a little bit instead of like flipping through. Everything, like a lot of stuff that Peach puts in there is it's super deliberate. She has a lot of stuff, and she will. There's no stray lines on her page, I can tell you
Mm.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a good way of looking at it too. I mean, it is like I think the patience to it makes certainly me as a reader
Mhm,
focus and hone in and be like, all right, because I think in manga too, one of my I'm much newer to it, but
mhm,
one of my things initially was like, okay, we got our cut up, we got our close up of an image and an item, and there's a lot of different visuals on the page. And I'm kind of just skimming, trying to, and I'm like, I think
mhm.
as a superhero reader, I'm often like, I'm jumping from bubble to bubble,
Yep,
a lot of times, and I'm not
yep,
necessarily paying attention to like, well, why did they choose to
mhm,
put that button in front of me or Hisako's arm? You know what I mean? So it's
mhm.
asking those questions about the intentionality of the art.
Yeah.
Um,
I love the readers that pick up on this, like, when Hisako's armors first appears, there's this, like, sweet little subtle scene that to me is so Peach where the armor waves at her, and
yeah,
I only see, like,
yeah,
like, a few readers will pick that up, but the ones who are just flipping pages, they're not gonna pick up a lot of the fun stuff that she's putting in there, I think.
yeah. No, it's very cool. I
Mhm.
like that. Um, as far as kind of where we ended with issue 6, and again, I don't want to spoil too much. Certainly, there are some
Are
teases
we on issue
about.
6 now? I'm currently working on issue 8, so I never know what the one is currently published,
Okay,
so okay.
issue 6 came out last week in
Okay,
shelves.
okay.
Yeah, yeah. And we got the Children of the Atom is
Mhm.
this cult, and so we've got a connection obviously to X-Men language and X-Men lore. What without spoiling anything, what should readers expect about where the story's going?
How can I say stuff without spoiling stuff? I mean, I will say that right now, all the clues are there of what is going to happen, but there's also some really fun stuff I think no one's expecting. Um, we definitely have like some big reveals, hopefully. And I think like expect and you've seen I think a lot of people have seen stuff, through previews catalogs of some of who the new characters are coming in and things like that.
Sure.
But it's definitely the slow build up and it'll have a good payoff. Like it'll definitely like that's another thing where I think manga is paced like is that imagine like a thing of like a thing of old movie thing of dynamite with a very slow fuse, so it goes zzzz, and only when it gets there, it gets there.
Yeah, yeah, right.
And
You'll
you
know it.
guys, yeah, you'll all like it a lot when it gets there.
Okay.
But yeah, I had a lot of fun like doing the Children of the Atom. Oh, what happened in issue 6? Was that when we introduced?
It's the big Shadow King confrontation issue.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, yeah.
So he's finally labeled Shadow King.
Finally labeled the
We
Shadow
get our
King,
official
yeah.
naming, and kind of you get the awareness that of how much he's been behind the scenes, connections to the cult, that sort
Mhm.
of thing.
Yeah,
Um,
I really like, I enjoyed a lot of him and right, putting him and Surge together. Like, one of the things I've been trying to do, at least dialogue-wise, is make sort of, like, counterpoint personalities, so I wanted, like, May and Nico to sort of, like, play off each other and Surge and, the Shadow King to play off of each other, and I think that's yeah, I think it looks really nice, and obviously, visually, it's just stunning.
oh
There's
yeah,
stuff where all of us on the team where every now and then we'll get pages from Peach and we're just jaw-dropping, we're like, "Oh my god."
yeah.
Yeah, look at that. Isn't that gorgeous?
Who are some of your favorite characters to dialogue, or who's becoming
Uh
like a personal favorite?
I mean, May is one of the most fun because she's just goofy. I
Yeah.
really like I really like doing Nico and May off of each other. Like I think that that's nice because you've got like my Nico is a little more aristocratic and May is more of like a little sort of like gutter punk, and so the two of them,
Mhm.
anytime you have conflicting personalities, I think it adds a little bit to it. And I've been trying to add like a little more, just to make it a little because like the that was another thing, like, because speaking of Claremont, is I grew up on the Claremont X-Men. So when and specifically like the '80s Claremont X-Men. So when I got to
Mhm.
dialogue the X-Men, you're just gonna hear a lot of Claremont coming out of there.
Yeah, yeah.
And one of the things I like a lot is when he would do like the sort of back and forth banter, and so and I've been going through like and rereading a lot of old issues to try and just like pick up on some stuff and see what we can bring in. That's
Hmm.
another thing I really like to do is sort of like I'll drop pure Claremont line references in there, and that I think absolutely no one picks up on but me. Um,
Do you have any examples that jump to mind?
I like in Demon Days, I did a lot of them. Like I especially when there was a confrontation between Magic and our I guess our version of Phoenix, as they gave one of the lines where he's like, "But we were friends," and it's like, "In the name of that friendship, I will weep over your grave." I mean, that comes directly from Claremont,
Yeah.
And I'll do a lot of little Easter egg things like that, mostly just to amuse myself. But if I can slip them in, then I absolutely will do that.
All right, that's fun. I'll be on the lookout for that.
Yeah.
That's very good. We got a good question here from Basaluna in the comments. Thank you
Hmm.
for adding this. It says, I'm curious about the workload. Did you, Peach, or Wilmoss ever consider GIS artists or break months? You mentioned earlier, Peach kind of
Uh-huh.
she's adapting to, the
Yeah.
monthly and doing interiors. Or she said, or the question here is the plan to make sure Peach can make every issue?
I I've thought about that. I don't think that there's no guest artist. It would be impossible. It
Yeah.
would be like having Alex Ross do a series and then suddenly have someone in the middle do a guest issue. Like it
Issue
would be
issue
so
three of Marvels is not Alex Ross. Yeah.
yeah, it would be so utterly dissonant, and so utterly, especially when it came for the trade to finally be read. Yeah, I don't think that Ultimate X-Men can exist as it is without Peach Momoko. It's way too much of her vision.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
It does seem like it would be very strange
Yeah.
to have that
So
experience.
Yeah, so Peach is keeping up with the workload. Like I said, she's canceled a lot of other stuff in order to keep up with it, and she's super focused on it. And the thing about Peach is that she is just like she is an art machine. Like she is just one of the most dedicated people I have ever seen in my life. Like when we'll have like Zoom meetings, and basically like she'll just be over on her thing drawing while
She's
I'm
drawing the whole
sitting.
time.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, she does not stop.
Very good. Well, I mean, that's super exciting for those of us that are loving the book
Hmm.
because again, I've been saying this on every live stream I do, but like
Hmm.
the Ultimate Universe right now is so good, and I'm really
Hmm.
excited and happy about what Marvel's been able to do. And I think, part of the reason it's so successful is yes, there's, a lot of Easter eggs and
Hmm.
these, things for people who've loved the characters for a long time, but it's also like it's very creator focused.
Hmm.
It is allowing individuals who are good at making comics to have their say, right? And
Hmm.
do their version of it. And I think that's what's so cool about Ultimate X-Men is it's like it's not like the other 3 books, and it's not like any book
Hmm.
coming out from Marvel, with the exception of, Demon Days in the past, right? So it's like, it's just so wholly its own thing, and I think that's
And
very, very appealing.
well, then I would say, the key that makes it successful is readers, because people can make anything they want. And if readers aren't buying it and responding to it, then it will never continue.
Mhm.
And so to me, what really like the fact that the readers have really gotten behind this, like that is what makes the book successful to me.
Yeah,
Every single person that buys it, that talks about it online, that shares how much they're excited about that, they're the ones who truly deserve all the credit, because without them, um, we would have died after issue 1, you know?
sure. Yeah.
So
Well,
I am
it's I
just
mean, that is the
yeah,
danger of,
mm,
this is a
trying
direct market
something new.
Marvel book, right?
Yeah, it
Yeah,
may
it's
not work.
yeah,
You experiment and it's great after the fact. Like 2020 Vision's like, "Oh, of course it was gonna work." But I tell you, when we
yeah.
put out when we put out issue 1, we had no idea if there was gonna be an issue 2. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
who knew if people were gonna respond to it or not? And I'm just so thrilled. So they are the ones who, and I tell that like a lot to readers and like comic people. I'm like you are actually the ones who drive where the next comic series goes. You drive Marvel Comics by what you purchase.
Yeah.
You drive Marvel Comics. It's not really like editorial, like they'll have great ideas like stuff like this, but if readers don't respond to it, then it withers on the vine, and that's the last you'll ever hear of it.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, no, it is. It's a weird
Yeah.
amount of power
Hmm.
as a
It's
fan,
huge.
like your dollars really do
Yeah,
do matter.
fans have an immense amount of power, but I will say the one thing where fans have no power is yelling on the internet. That actually achieves nothing. Like I
Mhm,
see a lot of
mhm.
really, you could be the loudest yeller on the internet in the world. It really doesn't matter. But what matters are all those silent fans who, or hopefully the loud ones who are shouting their enjoyment of it. But yeah,
Yeah.
you know, like I just, big applause, honestly, to every single person who has stuck with us, and I think it's so amazing because I
Yeah.
know it's unusual, and it just thrills me that you're there.
No, it's cool. I certainly see more praise than not in
Mhm.
the circles I travel. I'm sure there's a rage machine for everything out there, but,
There was, but I think they
yeah.
died off really quickly once they saw that this is what it was gonna be,
Yeah.
and everyone else was super excited, so now we're just yeah, full steam ahead.
Found the audience. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Very good, very good. Um, what's one thing that you think a lot of folks have missed in Ultimate X-Men? Is there anything that feels important that you're like, "I don't see anybody talking about this?"
Huh, that's a good question. I haven't been paying that much attention to what people are talking about, to be honest. I find
That's
that
probably healthy.
it's probably for yeah, it's for the best. I know, like, every time I've seen some speculation about it, they're always off. What I will say, one thing that I saw a lot of readers talk about, and it's not something they missed, but it's something that they've gotten wrong. Um, because we're bringing in obviously, Psylocke canon, and I've seen some readers saying like, "Oh, they finally fixed her name because it's not KW."
Mm,
That's actually not true. I mean, both KW canon and KAN canon, they are both exactly the same. It's like this difference between someone being Chris, Chris, or Chris
mm.
Kris. One is not more accurate than the other. They're simply two different ways of spelling the same Japanese name. So we
Okay.
have absolutely no intentions to fix canon at all. They're just different because, like Japanese, obviously they don't use the alphabet, and so when the words come into English, there's different systems of romanizing them. And the most common one that we use is called the Hepburn system. And under the Hepburn system, she's Kanon. But under an older system, she would have been K. Like when Canon cameras first appeared on the American market, they were spelled KW. Um, A-N-O-N, because that was
Mm.
how you Romanized canon at the time, using a different system of romanization. So I will say, absolutely, we are not fixing canon or anything, because K-W-A-N-O-N was never wrong in the first place.
Okay. Okay. That's good. I think it only needs fixing if you didn't know how to pronounce it, which certainly was my case
Well,
for a long time, saying
totally.
Quanon. Yeah.
Quanon, yeah, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
But now
Which
it's you've simplified it, but it's the same thing.
Well, like we simplified it, because we're just using the modern Hepburn system of romanization for sure. And it's to me, it's the preferred romanization. I think it's a more accurate representation of the Japanese vocalizations.
Yeah.
The only reason why you would use an older one is it's kind of like it gives it an air of I guess, I don't know, fanciness, kind of like spelling mystique the way they do with like my. It's the
Hmm.
same thing. It's like a lot of people do that in English where they'll have like a superhero name and they'll spell it with sort of an archaic spelling or something to give it like a little hint of mystery, and that's really the only
Sure.
thing. Yeah, and you've kind of lost that by removing that archaic romanization from it. But yeah,
A little visual spice
little visual spice,
in the
exactly,
language.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
and,
Yeah.
our modern version of canon is that was a lot of fun to write. That was an actually fun piece of a weird bit of dialogue that Peach and I actually had to work on together because, canon in the comics, and, once again, I don't think this is a spoiler or anything, but she does kendo, which is a Japanese
Yeah.
you know, sword fighting. Myself, I'm a fencer, so I'm a saber fencer, and I kept putting in fencing dialogue, and Peach was like, no, that's not right, this is total, so we had to have a conversation about the difference of dialogue between kendo versus saber fencing, because
Hmm.
saber fencing relies heavily on French language, which obviously sounds weird if
Hmm.
you know you don't have a kendo fencer going touche or en garde or anything like
Okay.
that. um, so that was
Yeah.
something where I really had her expertise overruled mine for sure, because I had all this fencing background and she has done kendo before, so we brought all the kendo language into it, and that was really fun.
There you go. Very good.
Yeah,
Oh, that's an interesting example of collaboration. The little things that like nobody would
and no one ever
would
know.
think are a
Yeah,
conversation,
no,
but it's
you'll
like,
see
no, that
like
has to happen.
yeah,
Yeah.
you'll see like one word in there, and it actually was like 10 back and forth emails between me and Peach.
Very nice. Very cool. Awesome. All right. So I think we've covered most of Ultimate X-Men. If folks here in the chat want to get into any questions on Ultimate X-Men, I'll try to address them.
Yeah,
I do want to
100%.
talk a little bit about what else you got going on. I know you've been bringing Shigeru Mizuki to English for quite some time here.
Yep.
I was telling you before the call very poorly how I'm trying to start reading as I kind of set up for this. Where should new readers start? Like where should folks dive into Mizuki?
So Mizuki's one of those interesting characters. Like I just got back from Anime NYC in New York, and so I was talking about this a lot. There's an interesting dichotomy between what Westerners like about Japan and what Japanese people like about Japan. Westerners, we tend to gravitate towards of Japanese products, like really, I guess, for lack of a better word, unnuanced to things like shonen comics, things like Naruto, things like One
Yeah.
Piece, which are enjoyable, but in Japan are aimed at small children, and that is their target audience. So
Yeah.
basically, the stuff we really love is aimed at 5-year-olds, and I think the reason why is because there's no cultural nuance that has to translate there. You're really like everyone can understand basic concepts of friendship, adventure, things like that. So there's no societal concepts to translate there. But one of the things when I first moved to Japan, and this would have been in 2000, um, I discovered rapidly that what Japan liked about Japan was entirely different, and that's where I discovered this comic book creator named Mizuki Shigeru. Where in Japan he's titanic. Like there's not a single Japanese human being that does not know who he is,
Hmm.
and all Japanese artists everywhere. If you name like you ask them what inspired them to be an artist, like so many of them will say Mizuki Shigeru, and it was just stunning to me that he was entirely unheard of in the West. Someone
Yeah.
so absolutely important to the culture, and world culture, because if without Mizuki Shigeru, you would have no Pokemon. You would have all this other stuff.
Hmm.
And so I just when I was in Japan, I sort of like made that I actually did. I got drunk at a friend's bar one time, and I stood on a table and I went, "I shall be the one to bring Mizuki Shigeru to the West." So I
Yeah.
decided to be like,
Your hero moment. Yeah.
yeah,
Your
I
shonen moment.
decided totally. That was my shonen moment, absolutely, where I decided to be like his apostle, and then I came over and worked for a long time to just never, and no success because he doesn't really fit this mold of what manga is to people. And finally, Drawn and Quarterly started putting out his work, and I was a little heartbroken because I saw, oh, his work came out and it wasn't me. I actually wrote Drawn and Quarterly this letter when I went on their Contact Us site, and I found out their company is so small. Their Contact Us site goes to the president, and
Okay, good to know.
yeah, made this impassioned plea, and now I've been working with John and Quarterly for, oh my gosh, for so many years now, bringing his stuff in, and like his stuff is true. Like it's hard to say where to start because he's very multifaceted. Like he has this really heavy nonfiction stuff, which is his personal memoirs of fighting in World War II, and then he has this sort of like lighthearted, what we call kid-friendly monster fun with his comic Kitaro.
Yeah.
Um, and it was when I first started working with Mizuki Shigeru, it was really important to him that we presented all sides of him. He said that one of the reasons why people hadn't licensed him before is because they wanted to just cherry pick the fun stuff.
Mm,
They didn't want all this other sort of like heavy stuff, but it was really important to him that he be presented as a full artist.
hmm.
So I think personally, the best way to get started with him is to one of each, like get a
Yeah.
Kitaro book and maybe get like Onward to Our Noble Deaths. And, then you understand that this is this artist that could do so many different things.
Yeah.
Um, which is interesting because, a lot of artists, they just do the one thing and that's all they'll ever do.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's like, oh, they were. It reminds me. Actually, I got the chance to interview Garth Ennis not too long ago,
Hmm.
and he's done all these, war comics.
Hmm.
And he's just kind of something a love of his and something he grew up with. But then for many comic readers, they think of him, they think of Preacher, they think of The
Yep.
Boys, and they think of this, sort of satirical farce type stuff.
Hmm.
And it's like no, like sometimes creators contain multitudes, right? So it sounds somewhat similar in
Yeah.
the sense of like you have manga from the same creator, but it's totally different genres, but to get the
Hmm.
full understanding,
Well,
you
and I
know
remember listening to Alan Moore talk about that one time, and he was, talking about how frustrated he was with the Western comic market that the great creators would then just basically they figured out how to do their one thing and they stuck with it. And I remember
Mm.
in his interview, he's like, he said like, "Where's Alex Ross's, underground sex comic? Like where, like why do they all just do this one thing over and over again?" And I
Yeah.
was like, yeah, I mean, it is also true. But then you look at someone like Mizuki Shigeru with this body of work that lasted, 50 years, where he's touched upon every genre that you could possibly imagine, including his underground sex comic, which is, one of those things
It
that
exists,
will,
yeah.
yeah, that will probably never be translated. But yeah, and he like, and his work can also be read on just like an immense amount of layers. I was doing a event once with a friend of mine, Jay Rubin, and he's this, Harvard professor emeritus, like just galaxy brain dude. And he was looking at one of the comics and like he's like, "Oh, this is a reference like a fourth century, no play by the writer Niam Zayami." And I'm like, it had just gone completely over my head. I'd never even noticed it.
Sure, yeah. I mean, that
Yeah.
sounds one of the things I was talking about this recently, and you're expert translator, award-winning translator, you're doing this work on Mizuki and trying but one of the things that I found very interesting was you wrote this article on Comics Journal a while back
Hmm.
about, with kind of the premise of I think it was the rule of Rubin, so I think you just referenced
Yep.
him,
Yep.
right? You read the words in the
That was
comic.
before I'd ever even met him too when I wrote that.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah.
Okay, yeah. I
Yeah.
was like, "Are we already friends?"
Yeah.
But, like, how with the translator
Hmm.
work from Japanese to English, that the words folks are reading, you're often reading the translator, right? That
Oh
it's
yeah.
you have to contextualize language
Hmm.
and because I was saying recently, like, I read, like, a bunch of Nabokov in college, and it always kinda blew my mind how it was like, the language is so beautiful, and it's like, well,
Hmm.
the translator had to make it beautiful.
Oh yeah.
It's
Yeah.
Nabokov wrote in Russian. So I find that stuff super
Yeah.
fascinating,
And that's
and
I mean,
yeah.
that's another, like, battle I've been fighting since I got into comics was trying to get people like, to educate people not only to be a translator, but to sort of educate people to be an educator as well. That's one of the reasons I wrote the Comic Journal article. And, like, I remember for years in the Eisner Awards, every time the Eisner Awards would come out, they would list all the works in translation and not list the translator. And so, myself being as annoying as I am, I used to email Jackie Estrada an updated list. I'm like, "Oh, you forgot some names off of them?" Um, and then she finally started putting translator names on the Eisner Awards for works in translation, which made
Good,
me
yeah.
happy. So being annoying sometimes absolutely works.
Yeah, that's a good life lesson. Let's see. Richard here in the comments asked, "I'm sorry, what were the two titles you recommended?" I think it was Kitaro and Onward to Our Noble Deaths. Is that right?
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
those are great starter volumes. Like Kitaro and Onward to like Showa History of Japan is probably his magnum opus, but it's also a commitment. It's 4 books. It's 500 pages per book. So I think Onward to Your Noble Deaths and Kitaro are both like really great ones. They'll give you a taste of if you like to go more or not.
Awesome.
They're both
Okay, I have
excellent.
one. I have
Hmm.
two more questions for you.
Yeah,
And then we'll let you go. Thanks so much for your time today. I
yeah,
appreciate you
absolutely.
you taking the time to chat. Um, I was asking this question the other day, and I'm fairly new to manga. I haven't read a heck of a
Hmm.
lot of it. Who's considered like the writer's writer, right? Because you have all these incredible mangakas, and you have like Mizuki and like
Hmm.
Osamu Tezuka is often called the god of manga and these things. Then you have like Naoki Urasawa, is obviously this like
Hmm.
really revered creator. Um, who's considered like the best with language? What would be your take on that?
Huh, that is a good question because it's not, it's interesting because because manga generally, I mean, you generally have a sole person that's doing it. That's another big difference between Western manga and Japanese manga is that manga is almost all what they would call a cartoonist. It's a writer and an artist,
Right.
and there's the two things go into concert so well. I think that like if you look at manga, like you have I think you would have your great two pillars. Like that's Tezuka and Mizuki. So Tezuka and Mizuki are the two people upon which all manga rests. Like every single manga artist, you can draw a line from like one of them to the other ones. But I think that like who really, if you had a sort of, excuse me, if you had a sort of like Alan Moore of manga, I guess it
Yeah.
would be Urasawa. He's the one that took manga and really like pushed it in this literary direction that it hadn't been before. Um, he absolutely with all of his stuff, like with Monster, 20th Century Boys is an absolute like just masterpiece.
Mhm.
He only does masterpieces. It's pretty crazy. There's literally not a bad one. Pluto is
Yeah.
absolutely stunning. And then there's many more that have never even gotten translations. Like one of my dream projects would be to do his one of his early works, Yawata-chan, the fashionable judo girl.
Mm.
He has like his cute judo girl comic, and
Yeah.
but he's definitely, I would say, the writer's writer one. He's the one where there is only one Naoki Urasawa, and there will only ever be one Naoki Urasawa for
Okay.
sure.
Okay, interesting. I because
Yeah.
that's definitely the creator that I gravitated to the most
Hmm.
when I was diving in. I mean, I
Yeah.
did Pluto fairly early, and that was the first manga where I was like, I can't put it down. I have
Oh
to
yeah.
get every volume
Yeah.
immediately.
And
So yeah.
that's one of the things I love about manga is that manga is like when you look at two of the main differences between American comics and Japanese comics is that at one point in time they both confronted the same issue, which was parents.
Mm,
Oh my God, look at the parents. What are they doing? Right? In America, obviously, that was like around the 1950s, with the House of Un-American Activity, killed all the horror comics, started and basically sanitized all of comics. So we didn't really progress for a couple of decades there. The same confrontation happened in Japan with a comic artist called Go Nagai and his comic Haruinshi Gakuen, Shameless School. And the editors did the opposite thing. Like literally, he's like, "What am I supposed to do? I'm getting death threats." And his editor said, "Make it worse." And so they like literally made everything worse and worse and worse until finally the parents just capitulated. And so because of that,
oh,
Japan
that's
never
amazing.
had
Yeah.
that moment where they went backwards. They never had that time where they were sanitized, where someone decided they were children's comics. And so
Mhm.
they were able to progress as a medium for a good 3 decades longer than the American comics medium was able to because of the Comics Code Authority. And
Mhm.
because of that, it just split and branched into so many different genres, so many different art styles. I mean, there's a saying where we say that like there's a manga for everyone, and that is truly as in there is literally a manga, whatever you're interested, whatever your hobby is. If you are a turnip farmer, I guarantee you there will be a manga entirely about turnip farming.
Yeah, yeah, right.
And so I always tell people like when you go in, if you've never read much manga, don't be confused that all manga is Shonen Jump. That
Right.
would be like that would be like making the mistake that all comics are Marvel DC. You know that
A
there are
mistake I absolutely made when I started.
yeah.
I was like,
You
"Oh,
know,
everything's Full Metal Alchemist." It's like, no, no. Yeah.
exactly. And there's so much other just amazing, fascinating stuff out there. And I love the fact that it's finally like the American taste for manga, like we finally matured, I guess, as readerships that now people are starting to branch out to other different things and finding this really incredible, amazing world out there. So I
Yeah.
hope all listeners do that. Like if you like, if you like Demon Days, if you like Ultimate X-Men, check out some of the other cool stuff out there. Let this be a bridge to this entirely cool world that maybe you haven't read before. I'm currently on I read, and that's the other thing about manga that's so great is it's so cheap. Like I read the Shonen Jump app, and it's $2 for a month
Yeah, it's a
to
great
access
deal.
for their whole catalog. And I'm currently reading this one called Akane Banashi, which is entirely the story of this old traditional Japanese folk like a storytelling art called rakudo, and it's just like it's absolutely fascinating. I love it so much.
Awesome, awesome. Are there any manga that are, like, particular influences on Ultimate X-Men, do you think? Like, between you and Peach that you kinda share and
No,
reference?
the biggest there's because Pete's really doesn't. Pete's is also interesting is that even coming from Japan, she never wanted to be a manga artist. She
Mhm.
always wanted to work in American comics. The number one influence on Ultimate X-Men is Barry Windsor Smith's Weapon X.
Oh, okay.
That's
Yeah, yeah.
that's absolutely the sort of, I guess, the vision statement, I guess, if we had one, is
And
Weapon
that's
X.
that's a great vision. I mean,
Yeah.
we got our tubes coming out of the Shadow King's head,
Yep.
right? A
Oh
la
yeah.
Weapon X.
Yep.
Oh, okay. Hell yeah. That's a
Yeah.
great visual inspiration.
Yeah.
Very good.
There's
One
a lot of nods back to Weapon X. So if anyone wants to like I would encourage also everyone like that's a great idea actually. I should have mentioned that. Go read Weapon X and then come back and read
Yeah.
Ultimate X-Men and you'll see the echoing moments in there.
Yeah. It's one of my favorite Marvel comics. It's my favorite Wolverine
So
comic of all
good.
time. It's well worth the
Yeah.
time. Yeah,
And it's a
absolutely.
lot like Peach was where Barry Windsor Smith was just given, sort of a free license to do something entirely different and came up with something entirely amazing.
Yeah.
And I think that's great when artists are allowed to just produce something.
Very good. Very good. All right, we got one final question here
Yeah.
from Tio. Will this comic eventually bring in Beast, Storm, Wolverine, and other known X-Men?
No, absolutely
No.
not. I can answer that
Hard
with a
no.
hard no. Yeah, there will be no Beast. We had Storm appear on a announcement on TV
Like an I
once.
okay, yeah, I was gonna say
Yeah,
like a news alert.
a
Yeah, 'cause
news alert.
she's in
Yeah,
Black Panther. We
yeah,
got
we
a
had
Storm.
we had
Yeah.
Storm. So that is it. That is as close as you're probably going to get to Storm being in the comic.
Okay.
That was our one little thing that we threw just so everyone knew we're really in the X-Men world.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, don't hold your breath waiting for the classic X-Men to show up.
For all the faves.
Yeah.
Okay. I appreciate your
I
honesty on that.
Yeah, and I hope that people will find new faves. I mean, that's one of the other things is
Yeah.
like I love those characters too also, but they were once new. There was once a comic called Giant Size X-Men that appeared before at a time when no one had ever even heard of them.
Mhm.
So allow there to be new.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. All right, Zach, final thing.
Mhm.
What do you wanna promote or where should people find you?
Uh, I'm on Twitter. I'm on Blue Sky a lot, which is kind of my new favorite social network. But I'm
Yeah.
still on Twitter as well. What I would promote, like, I mean, obviously, aside from Ultimate X-Men, like, I would say, like, support all of those books out there that are trying to do something new. Support like NYX, which is trying to do something new out there. Like just broaden your taste. Take some gambles, try some things that maybe you've never tried before, and you'll be surprised at how amazing they are.
Amazing. I love it.
Yeah. And also allow stuff to be what it is instead of constantly worrying about what it's not because
Mm.
yeah,
That's a good one. I gotta fight that urge. I
totally.
definitely I
Yep.
have the same thing where I'm like, "Okay, this is I have a vision for what I want this thing to be. That's
Mhm.
fine. I'm not
Yep.
making it. What is it actually?" Right? And
Yep.
respond to that. Yeah.
Yep.
Very good. All right, Zach, thanks so much for your time. I really
Yeah.
appreciate you being here. This
Thanks.
was
This was a lot of
awesome.
fun.
Yeah. Thanks everybody
Cool.
for
All right.
joining in on the chat too.
Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.
All right. Okay. We did it. We had our Ultimate X-Men chat. Thank you to those of you who were here live. That was a good one. Zach was very forthcoming with what Ultimate X-Men is, what it's going to be. I really appreciate that. Thanks to those of you who got in questions here live. Again, if you're listening on the pod, of course, you can do that. You can go subscribe over to Comic Book Herald's Best Comics Ever. Like and subscribe to the channel, get more interviews like this. I definitely want to have Dennis Camp on the channel later this year. I think I want to do it when the first volume comes out so we can do an Ultimates in review. Fourth issue came out today of the Ultimates. I just want to reiterate, it is the best Marvel comic book. I like Ultimate X-Men a lot. I know we just talked about a bunch. I like Ultimate Spider-Man a lot. I think 3 of the 4 Ultimate books are genuinely great. And I like Ultimate Black Panther. I don't think it's great, but I think 3 of the 4 are genuinely great. The Ultimates is so good. It is so good. But this interview has me more pumped about Ultimate X-Men even, which I was feeling pretty bullish on. Is bullish the good one? You bullish or bear? Because as a Bears fan, I feel like being bearish has historically been generally a bad thing. Although this year I feel like it's a good thing. Now I'm even more confused. I'm excited about Ultimate X-Men. I'm excited about you being here. If anybody has any questions for me, I'm going to take one sip of water. I'm going to take one sip from our sponsor, and I will answer one question that comes in if we have anything. Otherwise, we can wrap it up. We are sponsored by Ice Water in a Owala bottle, which keeps it cool and keeps me cool, referencing a sponsor that I don't have. That's the stuff. Nobody asks. How do you think Devin Hester feels about these new kickoff rules? Not good. I'm gonna guess Devin's upset. Probably as upset as everyone's dad. You find me a guy with a dad, and I'll find you a dad who's upset about the new kickoff rules. I guarantee you, everyone's father is upset about the new NFL kickoff rules. I have not seen enough of them to have strong feelings, although I suspect, like all change, I will resist it until it wins me over. Richard says, will you keep us updated on manga you find good? Absolutely. I'm excited to. My favorite manga so far this year, new stuff that I've read, Chainsaw Man, Hirayasumi is really good. That's Hirayu. Oh no, I lost myself. Lost myself in that spelling. It's called Hirayasumi. It's really good. And what was the other one? Tokyo These Days by Taiyo Matsumoto. Those are my faves so far this year, but I'm open to suggestion. You can find all of these listed and promoted in Comic Book Herald's monthly newsletter, which goes out and lists all my monthly favorites and new trades, graphic novel. I try to get as much balance and variety in there, including manga. And I post that on CBH as well, right? All of this is free of charge, of course, just something I enjoy doing quite a bit. But if you have recommendations for manga I got to check out, I will do that as well. Let's see. Nobody says, have you read Dan Da Dan? I read the first volume and I got really distracted, but I've heard so many good things. I know I have to go back. Mountain Lions asked, did you check Exceptional X-Men? I have not yet, but I will. Let's see. At the end of this month, the end of September 2024, we're going to do a big X-Men from the Ashes look back at where the line is. All the launches will be out at that point. I'm going to have on 2 very special guests. We're going to have on Adam Reck from the Xavier Files podcast and Comics XF community, and Anna Papard of Comics XF Reviews and Writing, Comic Scholar, wrote one of the best articles ever published on CBH about Wolverine and violence. I think associated with the Claremont Run account, if I'm not mistaken. Two X-Men buffs, okay? And we're going to go all in on what's going on in X-Men from the Ashes, how we're feeling about it and all that. That's going to be at the end of the month. So I'm definitely going to, anything I haven't caught up on, I'm going to catch up on at that time. But in the meantime, I'm all Ultimates all the time. I like this issue today so much. I like the Ultimates number 4 so much. I'm making a new reading order for the new Ultimate Universe. I said I think I read the first issue of Fall of X, and I thought I retired. I handed in my papers. I said, it's been an honor. It's been a privilege to provide reading orders for the comic book community for over a decade. I just read Fall of the House of X number 1. I retire. I'm handing in my badge. Here are my claws. I'm done. I read the Ultimates number 4. I'm back. I'm back in, baby. Just when I thought I was out. That'll go live on CBH sometime soon. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Appreciate you being here. I hope you enjoyed that interview. I enjoyed doing it. Again, I'll be sharing that on CBH podcast. If you weren't able to catch the live stream here live, like, subscribe, share, tell a friend. Try something new. As Zach recommended, it was great send-off advice. Try something new. Comics. And in life, maybe. I don't know. It could be dangerous. Enjoy the comics.